Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of OK Xoomer, Conversations with Creative Engineers and More. Today, we're here with Benjamin Treuhaft. He is the co-CEO of Helpful Engineering and also a talented photographer and painter. Welcome, Benjamin. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So first of all, tell us about Helpful Engineering.
Well, helpful's a new thing, is probably the best way to describe it. And, to tell you about what it is, I have to tell you a little bit about what the journey that we're all on, as we build out what is a new way of, it's not just a new way of producing design, addressing challenge, but identifying demand, and then producing solutions around those, around what we identify as these challenges as being a social impact, social benefit way. We make things that people want and need. So back in the beginning of March, it was clear to many of us that the situation in Italy and in Europe was already growing out of hand exponentially, same way it had gotten out of hand in China already, and it was clear that it was going to hit Western shores hard, much harder than anybody was willing to admit, and certainly much harder than anybody was doing anything about. And we knew it was going to be this, what we've been all dealing with. It was clear to, it was just if you knew anything about the way virus works or what this kind of virus works, and it just was immediate that it was obvious that this country has never dealt with true infectious disease, in particular America. I mean, I don't really mean to make helpful about an American centric thing, it's not, but America has never had enormous experience with true infectious disease. The last time anything hit this country really bad and hard, we're talking polio, and not the same thing at all. And so I knew what it was going to mean because I have a mom who is a PhD microbiologist, virologist, and who led regulatory and drug development at Schering-Plough and Hoffman LaRoche for many years, and then went on to start up many biotech companies. So I've grown up in drug development and regulation through her career, and she was responsible for bringing the first treatment for Hep C to market, Intron A, interferon.
Yeah.
So I had spent my life talking with her about things like surveillance data and looking at what the impact of, how virus works on organisms as things jump animal wells, what the totality of that picture looks like. SARS, A, H1N1, so through this. The point being, America didn't know what the hell was going to, it was walking into, but it was clear where our shortages, that supply chain was going to break. It was clear how it was breaking because we had real-time example on the ground of how it was breaking. And it was clear that it was going to get worse before better. So what Helpful was a bunch of people that literally came together on, most people are familiar with Slack, distributed working space. If you're not, you probably are by now.
Yeah.
So people came together on a Slack, which the tech communities very much use. It's a programmer's tool, but primarily, although now it's a much bigger, tool with many more uses. It started off as, just 10, 15, 20 people trying to talk about, well, gee, what do we do? How do we use our knowledge across economics or software engineering to mitigate this? And over the course of the next 3 weeks, it ended up with a Joggle page. Joggle is a European thing, just one giant lab. It's an open science platform. And then somebody said, oh, hey, on Reddit, we're doing this thing. There's a problem. Everybody want to come help? And we scaled to, 13, 15,000 people in about 3 weeks getting to work on this. So now our list of people who've registered at helpful. Although, in any given week, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people are coming through the Slack, working on active projects at any given time. Especially as the first, what I would call we're at the end of the first generation of these things that's really, that are going to market and becoming products, for example. So we actually have an example of one of the projects that was born. This was done in April,
Wow. So
but it
what is
took
that? How's it
this.
used?
This is the open standard respirator.
Okay.
So this is in its final stages of FDA approval. I'll talk about this and its journey in a minute.
Awesome.
We've taken this time, a big part of it, to learn about because none of us did any of this shit before. Like, we all come from different walks of life, and we showed up because the people that do this stuff for a living, make things, like, they didn't do it.
Mhm.
Nobody filled these gaps in supply chain. Nobody filled these gaps in supply or in needs. I mean, people showed up and made a bunch of vents, and like, some of them made okay, good, some reasonable vents. They made too many. They made the wrong thing. They didn't identify it right. They didn't get them done fast enough, and then they didn't fill all the holes around what some of these things are. And this isn't to fault anyone, by the way. I don't fault anybody in the totality of the response, but there were other more there were other problems that became clear that had to do with brittle supply chains that are long. And people have known that these issues exist for a long time. For example, we know what manufacturing looks like in America really pretty well. And we've also know that we have had, issues around subcomponentry and things like that, where certain other things are made and why they're made. Okay. But the totality of these things were that as first timer newbies coming to now enter into the highly regulated medical sphere to try to put things into the hands of caregivers, frontline end users, not in matters of years, from new product development, which, normal new product in medical, you're, 2.5, 3 year life. Okay, we didn't have that kind of time in our mind. We needed to do it yesterday. Well, we didn't know how hard it is to be helpful that way. That's not the way the world was designed to work. So we had to learn, okay, well, we made things as fast as within a week that could go in, whether they were face shields or whether they were, mask designs that were specified out of the right material. And we were able to take advantage of, whether it's additive type manufacturing, desktop printing, I mean, maker level response to scale to industrial level additive manufacturing response to, using modern laser cutters, is, switching those things to die cutting. I mean, some of them, I wish I had an example of the origami shield that was originally produced on laser cutters that were then output at Xometry's factory in volume through Mass Project, which was another not-for-profit that we incubated and spun out. But it's still to this day the cheapest flat pack face shield that's made on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And the point is to get that thing in the front door like yesterday. Well, wait a minute. Why can't it go in the front door? Why do they have to sneak these things in the back? So some of us, while there were people, engineers that were really like, and volunteers on the ground pushing these things to nurses, to get them in, who cared how, through the window. Some of us were sitting here looking at this and was like, it's more than just supply chain that's busted. Like, what are the elements of supply that's busted? What is the inhibition? Why is everybody frozen when it comes to just doing this? Why are we not throwing certain types of caution to the wind? Or maybe better put, why are we not able to reconfigure to meet this challenge collectively? Where is the issue? Not just in cooperation, but collaboration, two different things. Why is it that, you know, and we were angry about it, although we didn't know who to be angry at, and we just wanted to fix it, and so we started studying the problem, and that resulted especially as we were getting into producing more complex devices that require FDA approval. Okay, we determined very early on in April that all of this open source stuff across the world, and of which there's a lot of people that began looking at creation of open source medical stuff, because it is the way the future of design and engineering thinks. It comes from software and it's spreading in the hardware. But you can see the results of what this looked like at, at OSMS, open source medical, supplies, where these folks spun up and began categorizing, putting together links from all different types of medical innovation that people that from the hobbyist level, the more serious teams have put together around the world. And I mean, I think I can forget how many people, 20, 25 million people look at their Facebook page, I mean, like it's a huge thing and growing and good. And what we started to think about, well, what does that mean? What does that mean that people want to work that way? They want to collaborate that way. What does this interest mean? What's the lowest common denominator? Well, our observation around this was one, people are maybe a little bit more inventive than they've been giving credit for in a long time as the cost of tools comes down. We went through this period in history where to be creative, like you had to have a wood shop or a metal shop or whatever to make something that costs a lot of money, a big bunch of money. And, then you had to have somebody to teach you to use the tool safely. I mean, this was my experience in high school. I grew up in the middle of Wisconsin, where, when you're 7, 8 years old, as soon as as soon as you pass from, well, actually you'd be a little bit older, 9, 10, you would move over into junior high school, but your first classes are shop classes. All right. Because you have to learn how to fix the farm equipment. You have to learn how to rebuild an engine. You have to finish a cylinder head. You have to learn how to forge. All right. I mean, I actually burned the shit out of my hand when I could grab the wrong end of the hot metal after flipping it around. I remember having to walk down to the hospital myself, like because blisters forming because but it's like dangerous stuff. But you learn respect for what it is to use the tools. And today, the same tool that I'm talking to you through is a whole part of the front end of what it takes to make something by virtue of various types of CAD or other 3D types of engine, a design tool, and then just bolt a printer on, and you've spit out at least the start of what something is, or I send it off to somebody like a Xometry or a Shapeways or whatever, and like I can actually make a product. Like that's my business now all of a sudden. All right. So the nature of what the tools are, the way they work, and how that whole thing operates has changed. Okay. Well, that means that there's a lot more people now that are starting to make things again because they're curious. Whether they're formerly, whether these are kids that are in engineering or, they're just interested in what the technology is because it's cool. All right. Now, one of the things that I think is an important thing, and we'll come back to this in a minute, is that, there's this difference. There's a difference between what the old version or the old vision of what manufacturing used to mean in this country, this 40s vision of manufacturing and the manufacturing base, big greasy family, factories covered in oil with, that, sparks flying everywhere, and like that's not what manufacturing is necessarily anymore. Mm-hmm. Manufacturing today, I mean, for example, if we go to a silicon fab, which is clean and everybody's in a nice white suit, like coverall, because if there's a speck of dust, you're losing $1 million in a run. That's manufacturing. There's elements of what the way the device like this is made that just completely by a bunch of bots, and the people component of what the manufacturing is. It's less about banging a hammer around or a welder, and it's the manufacturing worker is significantly closer to an engineer, in a mechanic in this respect, but it's some kind of hybrid. As such, it's a very different gig than what people, I think, imagine or still vision have in their head about it. And I think that it's important that this perception really start to change. And we started to observe all of this as we learned what it is to make something that could crack regulatory. All right, which is another conversation. What is the black box of regulatory? What does that mean? All right, and what do you do about it if you know nothing about it? You're not in the industry of any of the verticals that require, a regulated artifact. uh, how do you learn it? What tool, how do you produce against it? And this journey took us to beginning to understand, okay, well, we have to do all these things, check these boxes in order to output something that can make it in the front door. It's not just about us as, like making what we, making this however we want, with the expectation that it's going to be able to go in the front door, that a hospital can then, pay for it with a Medicare dollar, and that they're going to feel safe and comfortable and confident handing it out to doctors and nurses, and that doctors and nurses are going to feel safe and comfortable wearing it. And then, more to the point, did we do a better job than what is available, than like what an N95 is, or what what a surgical is, and what does all that, what does all that mean? What's that whole picture? What's that life cycle? Well, um, so that's how that week came to be. And at first, it was very much just this big messy slack that kind of self-organized. And then we started to figure out, okay, well, we have to do these things. So we went out and got some help. So, for example, we got our a QARA system from Zen QMS. Very kindly has donated one to us, and we began to learn what it is to do a risk analysis, a feature map, risk mitigation strategy that has to go along with each product, what it is to produce design control and check that stuff off. Again, it's one thing to be a hobbyist doing a little fun design in your computer that you're spitting out on your little desktop thing. It's a whole other thing when you're doing something that not only needs to be incredibly functional and wearable, but has to meet certain requirements. And then you have to get the thing, the issues around, like how are you going to get it made? What is it going to cost to make the thing? At what scale? All right. What throughput? Where are you going to do it? All right. So now we're talking about the supply chain, such that it can actually, when we start talking about this, trying to address the supply chain issue, particularly in something like this, well, wait, I don't want to make it. I understand that I can make it in one place really cheap and then send it everywhere, but it might take months not only for it to get there and for me to get paid. I don't want that. I want to make 100,000 of them this week and deliver them within 2-3 days to people. How do I do that? And I'm caring less right now about getting paid and more about making sure that people have them who need them. And what does that begin to look like? How do I scale? What does that look like? Well, that's where a different approach to intellectual property and a different approach to what comes along. Although at the same time, there has to be an entity that holds all this stuff, because the world demands that somebody hold liability.
Yeah.
So we start getting into all of these questions and what they sort of mean and the significance of them, and then the challenges inherent therein. And it's not easy stuff in many respects. Like, you realize how hard it is to be helpful.
Definitely.
You know, uh, um, and there's the additional problem too, which is that here we are trying to do all this stuff, and halfway, you realize as you're going through it, Jesus, I hope somebody doesn't sue the pants off of us, on the back end, not because we didn't make something safe or useful, but because they perceive what we're trying to do as some sort of a threat to existing structures of, how what service and support look like, or sales chains, existing value. And I guess to that, the only thing that I can sort of say is that, like, we don't really have any intention of becoming manufacturers of anything except where we need to, or where somebody else isn't going to just pick it up. We'd much rather that these things go through these existing service support structures where they do them really very well. We just think that we can find ways to do it all really much more efficiently. That's what we've learned. We make
For sure.
better stuff cheaper.
Cool. Well, Benjamin, thank you for the work that you and the team are doing, and thanks for joining the show today. Everybody, please Google Helpful Engineering, check it out, see what they're up to. They're doing some great work, and unfortunately, the COVID epidemic is here to stay. It is not. We have not made as much progress as we hoped we would have, looking back to last spring. So the need will still be there. Benjamin, thank you, and it was great to have you. And we'll be back with another episode of OK Zoomer in another couple days. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for having me very much, Aaron.